the data protection session for today. We got a message earlier, Mr. Mohapi unfortunately cannot present today. But in order for the program to continue, we will then start with session 2, which is Global Concerns and New Emerging African Cyber Law. We're not going to disrupt the program for the afternoon, but we are now going to welcome Dr. Akalemwa Ngenda. He was actually one of the first people to remotely present to this conference many years ago, as Prof. Claudio de Lucena said. I remember at the time, Dr. Ngenda had lost his flight and he wasn't able to come, and he was so upset. And using a terrible bandwidth connection, we actually got Dr. Ngenda to present. So Dr. Ngenda, welcome. His topic will be regulation of cryptocurrency in Africa, a legal overview. Over to you, Dr. Ngenda.
Very well, sir. Thank you, Sizwe. I remember those times. It was my Skype connection was the most terrible connection. But hopefully today I can give a good account of myself. So I will see if my laptop is not working well. Just let me know. I'm trying to share my screen here.
You can see your screen.
Okay, fantastic. So let me just make it bigger. And then maybe I can rattle through, because, so I'll put in the rejoinders in advance. So obviously, as Sizwe has said, I've sort of been called upon on short notice to do this paper. And my intention was to do it tomorrow, obviously. So I have a very huge PowerPoint, if you would like, which I was supposed to cut down to about 30 pages or whatever it was, but we'll see if we can go through. So there will be a lot of information overload. That's what I'm trying to say, by way of apology, because I didn't quite have time to cut through 70 pages. Just to pick up where Sizwe left off. So I've chopped off the legal overview bit here. And the reason I've done that is because what I want to focus on in this presentation is two things in particular. I want to look at the regulation of cryptocurrencies from two perspectives. So there's obviously the law, but I want to look at the law in terms of the jurisprudence behind what, in essence, is the argument I'm making, what the law should be, okay? So the law, both in terms of the statute book and the regulatory framework, because a lot of countries are working through this now and trying to decipher what law, what response they should give in terms of regulation to cryptocurrencies. So I want to focus on the philosophy, if you would like, behind cryptocurrencies and how that should translate into the law. And then obviously look at what that law should look like. So I have a very brief snapshot or overview of what the regulatory landscape looks like on a global scale and on a continental scale. And just to mention that on the second part, after researching a bit on this topic, what I've decided to do, which is why I plucked out the legal bit from this presentation is what I intend to do going forward is to obviously develop this paper separately, but to then work on a separate piece of research to map out the exact regulatory framework in each of the countries in Africa. So that will obviously become a paper on its own, because from my research, when I was looking for the data to see what the map looks like, there's not much agreement actually as to what the map looks like, and particularly because I found some stuff that relates to Zambia, which is where I come from, which I clearly know not to be true. That was the impetus for me to divide up the work like that. And I thought the second aspect of the research question, I think, deserves further consideration as a separate piece of work. So let's look at cryptocurrencies then. So I'll just give a brief background, and then I'll go into a bit of a legal theoretical conception of what I think the regulation should look like, bearing in mind the lessons and the experiences of the past. So let's start from the beginning, right? So, sounds rather biblical. I think I wanted to take liberties here because there's a sense in which if you are a member of my generation, which is essentially Generation X, you will always feel that we are the forgotten generation or the unappreciated generation. So I thought as a member of Generation X, I will take the liberty to declare, just for the purposes of this presentation, that the history of Africa begins in 2000. Okay, because everything before that is too grim, too dark, if you'd like. It's not something you want to remember. But on a serious note, there'll be a lot of economist covers, by the way, in this presentation. As you can see, so the story of Africa, if you chart it from around 2000, as the Economist has done, you start from grim, essentially hopeless, to the hopeful continent, and then it now is essentially a hopeful continent. Okay, so a bit of optimism at the moment. And the reason for that was the economic growth that followed about at least a decade, starting in the 90s, is where these lovely positive grand narratives of Africa begin. And part of the story in those narratives, the reason for this hopefulness, if you would like, is what was becoming the economic growth miracle in Africa, fueled by obviously natural resources, but also developments that essentially were the catalyst of the internet. Okay, and one of those, so two of the drivers for economic growth in that period is trade. So cross-border trade with the BRICS countries, which has increased significantly. I mean, the BRICS countries used to account for, less than 30 years ago, used to account for less than about 1% on global trade with Africa. And in the next 10 years, they will be doing more than half of that. And obviously, we know China is responsible for that. So there's trade on the one hand, and that has meant a lot of activity in terms of banking, obviously, and payments and clearance and settlements, because this is, just bear with me, that's why I'm taking this, the first part of the paper. But and part of that movement of money story is exemplified particularly in the case of East Africa and Kenya in particular. Okay, so the Africa has been an early adopter of digital technology or digital solutions most manifestly in our case, or for the example I'm using today, mobile phones. So mobile money payments has been a significant story. So this is accounted for both in terms of making payments for cross-border goods, foreign remittances, and just movement of money even domestically. So the idea, which is part of the grand narrative about Africa looking hopeful, is the idea that now that we're moving into the so-called fourth industrial revolution, Africa does not need to industrialize in order to develop. And as a matter of fact, because of being an early adopter of these digital solutions for development and human problems, if you like.
Faire encore une écho cérébrale pour contrôler. Okay. Après, ça peut être fait aujourd'hui, ça peut être fait la semaine prochaine, ça c'est pas grave. Ok. Donc, je sais pas. Je vais la dire maintenant alors. Pour voir. Ouais, demander.
I think there's a feed coming over my my transmission here.
Yes, we fixed that. I think someone pressed the microphone button. Over to you again.
Oh, fantastic. So I've lost my my line of thought now here. Where was I? So the adoption of early adoption of technologies, particularly innovations in financial technology, the argument goes, is supposed to put Africa in a position where she can do what other continents have not done before, which is to leapfrog, as it were, into the fourth industrial revolution without the necessity for industrialization. Now, whether that can be done is yet to be seen. But so at the center of that argument is innovations in technology. And some of these technologies now that are driving activity and growth in Africa, among other things, especially for things like payments for cross-border trade. So remember, trade and technology being two of the 5 drivers for growth. And in fact, then technology being identified by, say, the World Economic Forum going forward as one of the 6 foundational blocks for what essentially will become the new global economy. So part of those payments, if you check in across the world and in Africa in particular, is being done in cryptocurrencies. So around the world, most cryptocurrency transactions, probably with the exception of Bitcoin, is store of value. Okay, the majority, reportedly at the current moment, 2/3 of transactions in Bitcoin in particular in Africa is actually payments. Most of these goods from China. So Africa is seen as the ideal environment. If cryptocurrency is a global experiment, Africa is seen as some sort of Silicon Valley, right? The ideal place for this experiment to take place. It is not by coincidence when Facebook wanted to launch their Libra, their own digital currency, that Mark Zuckerberg went to Kenya to see what was going on there. And in more recent times, you've had I suppose it's the CEO, but it's the co-creator of Twitter, I think. Is it Mark or Jack Dorsey? Something like that. Has been to Ghana, I think twice now, pretty much for the same reason. Okay, so the background in Africa in terms of cryptocurrencies and why there's hope going forward rests on the current infrastructure, if you'd like, and the situation in Africa where, in terms of financial inclusion, we're lagging behind because 2/3 in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, 2/3 of sub-Saharan Africans do not have a bank account. So people are being missed out, both in terms of having access to money or credit, and just access to the financial system. And M-Pesa in East Africa has done a very good job, at least in terms of moving money around and even creating online accounts. So your device is your account in that sense. So there's a lot of optimism, therefore, going forward vis-a-vis human development, economic growth. Okay. Now, if cryptocurrency is the answer, what is cryptocurrency? I want to look at cryptocurrency, and I'll get to this in a minute or so. More, so two things I'm looking at here. Cryptocurrency as a technology, but most importantly, the technology on which cryptocurrency itself is based, because there's a lot of talk about cryptocurrency, and obviously rightly so about Bitcoin. But I think what is being missed here is the elephant in the room, which is the technology on which cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are based on. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that even in terms of regulation, there's one trick that regulators and governments are missing, which is they're focusing on crypto assets, as they are called in South Africa, or cryptocurrencies. Actually, there's a lot of resistance there. We'll get to that, calling them cryptocurrencies. But it's precisely because of the nomenclature that at the moment there seems to be a negative attitude or response to cryptocurrencies. And my argument, the first argument I make is that's where the mistake lies in trying to shape the regulation going forward. What we need to be focusing on is the underlying technology behind cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, because I think there are a lot of good things that can come from that. And that's what I like to focus on in this presentation. The other issue about cryptocurrencies that has regulators either riled or not very willing to lend cryptocurrencies an ear is precisely because they're called cryptocurrencies. And so the first response you get, this was the response in Zambia, I know for a fact, was Bitcoin is not money. Okay, so the regulators are not very willing to use the word money, we'll see why, in relation to cryptocurrencies, and therefore trying to tailor the regulation as such. I argue that's obviously a mistake. And from a legal theory or philosophical point of view, my argument is quite simple. In law, when we talk about things, concepts, such as property, or you say a company, we are rarely talking about the thing itself. We're talking about what the thing represents. And usually it represents relationships between people and relationships between let's just say, rights in rem and rights in personam. So a particular person and the world at large. That's what law usually represents. So I want to focus more on that aspect of the law, and then the technology. So law usually is talking about two things: a relationship and a thing. I think regulators are missing a trick here. The thing in relation to cryptocurrency is not cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. It's the underlying technology behind Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and so on and so on. And then the relationships are obvious. So we'll get to that. Okay, so that's why I think the technology matters here more than anything else. So we need to understand the technology, I think, in order for the regulators to get it right going forward. So what is Bitcoin? Now, obviously, I won't spend too much time on this because I'm no expert. And I know that most of you are more qualified than I can ever be on the science and the technology on this. But just to say that essentially, I think I said Bitcoin, actually. I keep saying Bitcoin. It's blockchain. So what I want to focus on is blockchain. The underlying technology behind cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin is the blockchain. And the blockchain is quite simply a type of what is known as distributed ledger technology. Okay, so it's essentially a shared record of transactions. Okay, and depending on whether it is decentralized and distributed, which is not the same thing, is another conflation that people are making when they're defining blockchain. The decentralization is actually quite different from the distribution. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. So some of the most successful blockchain like Bitcoin is well decentralized, has created, and let's call it an ecosystem, you won't hear that for the first time, of where you have a process or processes of reaching consensus, okay, and in a secure manner. So what you get on a blockchain, such as Bitcoin, is transparency. Everybody else knows what is going on. Everybody else has the record. And a transaction doesn't get on the record unless it's been authenticated, okay? And in a lot of respects, this is good because you're cutting out the middleman. You can trace activities and transactions. Because of the cryptography involved, this is fairly secure. It's actually one of the reasons that governments pretty much all governments around the world don't like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. It's precisely because they're very secure and people can remain anonymous if they want to. You don't have to be. That's another misconception about cryptocurrencies, that they either promote the kind of secrecy that obviously governments don't want. But you know, anonymity is pretty much an option on most of these technologies. So I've put a couple of visual representations here from some reliable sources. So there's the Financial Times with this one. As I said, I'm not the scientist here, but this is just to create a good narrative for when the presentations are shared with everybody. So there's a lot of hype about cryptocurrencies, and especially with the success of Bitcoin. So imagine it this way. If the internet, as we were told for a long time, for over 20 years now, the internet, the idea was, oh, the internet will change everything, okay? But as with most of these things, once you've changed everything, you can then sit back and say, well, nothing's changed, you know. Bill Gates wrote a book way back then saying we're going to change everything. We're going to change the way we shop. We're going to shop online. We're going to go to school online, which is very poignant at the moment, you know, and all these things. And all these things have come to pass. And then essentially we can simply turn around and say, yeah, well, you know, I still go to the shop on Saturday. I still go to school, and, you know. So anyway, bottom line, when you change everything, clearly nothing much changes. But if you think the internet changed everything, the idea here is that blockchain is going to change the internet or everything about the internet. Okay, so it's that next evolution. And derivatives or derivations of blockchain, such as cryptocurrencies, especially the successful ones like Bitcoin, are going to change everything as well. So, okay, in terms of Bitcoin, it's going to change money or currency as we know it. At least that's what Sir Richard Branson thinks. And when he thinks something, I think I listen. Now, if Bitcoin, if blockchain is the answer to everything, what is the question? So actually, I should have done this at the beginning. I think I got caught up into being a member of Generation X. In the next 5 minutes, do me a favor, if you will. Just think of, I want you to think of 3 words. One word that sums up what you think about the law, because I think this is crucial for the next 2 minutes. Just one word that sums up law for you. A word in ordinary language, okay? Write it down. I promise there's a prize fund for this in Bitcoin. Write down, also think of a word that sums up life for you, whether from a personal experience or from a philosophical point of view, just generally what you think. Just one word, write it down. The last one, think of a word and write it down that encapsulates what you consider to be the most important thing in life, or the most valuable thing there can be about society, about people, and write it down. So this is like playing cards, right? If I get the card right, I promise you, you will win some Bitcoin. So coming back to this question, if blockchain is the answer, what is the question? And so I'm going to skip through these. Just to say here, actually, so these go well when you get the presentation. But in explaining the blockchain as a ledger of transactions, essentially what goes on the blockchain is each transaction is essentially processed into a block, and then the blocks are linked together with what is known as, with whatever the encryption is, right, which is the hash. And that's what this visual here is about. So that's why it is the blockchain. So the blocks, the transactional data is linked together by the by whatever algorithm, and then you create. And the idea is obviously you can't change anything in any of the blocks. You would have to change everything. This is why cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are immutable. So you once something has been vetted and you put it on the blockchain, you can't change it. You can't revise it. So this is where the transparency factor comes from. Okay, so these are the good, and I'm highlighting all of this just to lay the groundwork, because there's a lot of, and I used to think this myself because this is what I heard on the news or wherever. There's a lot of misconception about cryptocurrencies being some sort of dark money or underground money on the internet. So if that was the question, the answer I would propose is trust. Okay? Just think about it this way. Who do you trust with the most valuable transactions in your life? It's your lawyer, your banker, your accountant, right? Why do you trust these people? Essentially, all of these professionals are just record keepers. They're keeping a record of transactions that you've entered into. Why do you trust their record? Okay. For no other reason then they've been vetted. So they're able to validate, to verify, and to clarify if you need. So they can authenticate this stuff for you. And so we'll skip that. Essentially, they're keeping a ledger, okay? And why do I have Luca Pacioli here? This is the Franciscan friar in Florence, who essentially gave us what we call double entry bookkeeping. Okay, so he systematized the ledger, and his ledger is everywhere. Okay, it's not exactly that, but the ledger is in essence, I'll come back to that. The ledger is in essence your bank. Okay, think about it this way. Everything that's valuable that you own, money, houses, assets, is simply an entry on a ledger. Okay, and that's what a bank is, an institutionalized big ledger. It gives you, hopefully it's honest, it gives you certainty, they can update your balance, and you have the safety. The three most important functions that the state, in essence, plays in our lives. Okay, and if anyone had any of those words down, I promised you some Bitcoin, but this is essentially what the blockchain gives you. It gives you consensus, collaboration, provenance, and security. So Caesar is just flagging me down here. So let me connect this back to the law. And so essentially what blockchain is doing is reconfiguring the nature of the relationship of trust that we have with the intermediaries that we've always entrusted with our most valuable transactions. Okay, what blockchain is saying is you don't need to know these people. You don't even need to trust them. Okay, so forget the handshake. All you need is a thumbs up, and the thumbs up is in the numbers. Trust the algorithm, trust the mathematics, and you have a system that removes, so it's, in essence, you decentralize intermediation, especially in banking and finance. And you essentially get the benefits of blockchain in the what I'm calling the trust ecosystem. And how should that translate to law? So that would have been the second part, but I'll leave it there. If some questions arise, I can connect it to the law. Suffice to say, I'll make one argument here, which is when it comes to law, most of the response from regulators that are trying to make law on cryptocurrencies or even the blockchain is the first response, or the first attitude you get is cryptocurrency is not money. And the reason they're saying it's not money is because, it's not a currency and it's not legal tender. Now, so it's not a currency because it's not a sovereign currency. And obviously it's not legal tender because the positive law doesn't say so. And my argument is very simple. Money is more than both of those things. The idea of money being sovereign currency, I mean, even the Islamic dinar, which has existed for what, just about 1500 years now, has no issuing state. There's no central authority. There are 425 countries that still use the Islamic dinar to date. Money does not need to have a central authority. So that's one. Two, the idea of a legal currency is a tautology. You know, it's not a legal currency because it's not legal tender. So once the first argument falls away, I submit in law, I think we should be able to find a space within the legal framework to define cryptocurrencies as money and as currency. and maybe without this being an affront to the fiat currency, obviously that's issued by the state, which I think is where the tension is. But if there are other questions regarding the law, I'll take them there. But let's stop there, since I said I wanted to emphasize the technology bit with the trust as opposed to the law.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ngenda. It's just 2:02. There is going to be a recap session of this session after lunch. So, sorry, past 1, I've just been told, sorry. 2:01.
It's 11 here.
Yes, I think we all have Zoom fatigue now. So I think what will be the best, with your permission, Dr. Ngenda, can we then do your Q&A when we come back from after lunch, when we do the recap session?
I'm happy to do that. Let me propose this as well.
Yes.
Can I send you the full package? And then so maybe people can see the legal part of the presentation, and they can incorporate that in the questions if they want.
Definitely, Dr. Ngenda.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everyone participating. I must say I'm very humbled. I see that there's a whole lot of academia in this year's conference. It just makes my heart go so beautiful, because for years we've been trying to get the best of the best here, and I'm glad that academia is taking this conference serious. So 2 o'clock we'll continue with the same session of global concerns, new emerging issues, and we will use the separate link that we have sent to you. Everyone enjoy your lunch and see you later. Bye.
Thank you.